All right, so this is what we were in last week, but I want to do 2D in Unity. Super easy. Press 2D button. We're in 2D now. Okay, so very handy. I will now make a. I'm gonna make a just a like cube. Just gonna have it there, and this is gonna be my ground for me to put my character on. I don't care about platforms. I just care about like there, left, right, moving for now. Now there's already a problem here, which is this is a box collider because it's a 3D object. So remember the thing with the game objects have components. So I can just right click, remove component, it's gone. Because a box collider is a 3D collider. If I add components, I can do box collider 2D. Now this works in 2D mode, which means it doesn't work in 3D. So if I go back to this box, if I put it there and give it like a rigid body, that should fall, but it's not going to interact because this is a 2D and that's a 3D collider. No interaction, okay? So 3D colliders only work with 3D colliders, 2D colliders only work with 2D colliders. Very common problem when people are making a 2D game. They'll make something a 3D box collider or a 3D sphere and like, why isn't it interacting? Because of this. So go back to 2D. And let me move that cube away. Okay. So I'm going to make a character controller, which means I'm going to start with something that is physics that I'm going to move left and right, okay? I will start with, I like starting with an empty. So it's always empty. Then I can add whatever I want onto it. So here's the empty game object here. And I'll call that player. I'm going to add a Capsule Collider 2D. And you can see that it looks like this little capsule. I can change like the size, the offset, the height, and the radius. So why do I use capsule? Anyone guess? All the examples I showed you was a box. Why do I use a capsule? If you think about how things collide and how they move, how do they interact, is there maybe a reason? Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. So if I have a thing here and I have a box that's like just there, it's gonna stop. It's gonna stop moving, and to the player, it's gonna be like, that's weird, I'm floating. If I have a capsule, it's on the edge, so it'll slowly fall down, and like it'll kind of fall off the edge, which feels natural. And also, if I have like another thing and I jump into it, a box will hit and it'll just go straight away. A capsule collider, if I hit at a bit of an angle, it'll bounce off. It looks more natural. Now, this is a cheap way of doing it. Like if I was going to make a full game, I would have. If you look at a game called Celeste, there's some examples online. Their character controller is crazy, but it's very good. So it'll do stuff like if the character is about to hit, it calculates the distance, and like if 1/3 of the body is inside the hit zone, it moves the whole character that way. So basically, if I jump and then just barely hit, it's like, okay, it's cool, you made it. There's a lot of checks in there, but that is a lot of stuff. So we're just doing the simple version. Simple version is just make the collider shape, the capsule. Okay. So we have a capsule collider, good stuff. What do we need again for it to fall? Rigid body. So we need a rigid body 2D. And we can test that, press play, that should just hit the ground. Good stuff. And it works. Okay, now I let it fall, boop, hits the ground. So collision is happening. Great. And let's start bit by bit. So what I want to do, I'm going to make a new script. And this is going to be Day2 script underscore character movement. And I'll drag that onto the player. Okay, cool. Perfect. Completely brand new script. Okay. I have a cheat here, so if we get stuck, we have all of that, so don't worry. Okay, so what should I define at the start? what do I want this thing to do? I want it to be, if I press right and left, okay. And what do we want it to do? We want it to move. How should I make something move in Unity? Do we know? Or you don't know? Hmm. Oh, like you don't understand the concept? Okay. Yes. Okay. So do you remember what the code said at all? Or no? Okay. And direction. Okay. So the vector and the direction, vector is a magnitude, so like how much, that's fine. And then direction is like, do I want left, right, up, that's fine. So we know we want that. So far we're just talking left and right, right? We're not going to worry about jumping right now. I want to know left, left, and I want to know right. I'm going to put it to my, like, maybe like arrow keys or WASD. But if I want something to move in real life, did you all do physics? Or like even juniors, baby physics even. If I want something to move in real life, what do I need to do? Push it, right? Give it some force. So there's two ways you can do that in Unity. You can add a velocity or you can add force. I can set velocity or add force. If I set a velocity, they do two different things. If I set a velocity, it's like I tell the chair, be velocity 5 in that direction. It's going to be immediately 5 in that direction. Sometimes I want that, but it's going to immediately go 5. If I add a force, then there's an acceleration. So it's like slowly adding more force until I reach a speed. So what I definitely need to define is I need to define a force, right? So how much of a force do I want to add? I will probably make it public because I don't know yet. In my head, I have no idea what the number is. I need to test it in the scene. So I'm going to do public move force. I'm just going to call it move force. Oh, what should I call it? What variable should I have, actually? Which kind of a variable should I have? A number? Probably a number. Which one? Int? What is int and what is float? Do we remember? Int is a whole number. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Float is decimal points. So which one do we think should work better here for a force? And I remember, I don't know exactly what the force is. Probably float, because if I do like 3 and it's too slow and 4 is too fast, I want to like 3.5 maybe, or whatever. So let's do a float. It's not wrong to do an int. The float just gives me a bit more control. So public float move force. And again, whenever I make it public, hurry up. On the player, it's going to show there's my move force. So I can change that, okay? So it's always there. So I need a move force, and then I need to get direction, right? I also need to know what to do with the move force. With this move force, what am I going to do with it? So right now I just defined move force. Where do I need to apply this force? Onto the player, right? Okay. In Unity, everything with physics is on the rigid body. So the rigid body 2D in this case. So the code needs to know which rigid body. It knows now, okay, I'm waiting for a number called force. Cool. What do I do with it? I need to apply it. So this is like the force to add to the rigid body to make it move. Okay. And then I need to know which rigid body to make it move. So I'm going to define this publicly so we can see it, but I don't need to. So public rigid body. Oh, it's not connected again. Yeah, it's not connected. Sorry. That's so annoying. I'll need to restart this. It's not connected because so it's not auto-completing myself. So let me just This is very annoying. Project settings. External tools. Oh my god. Why did this not save? So in case that does, I hope this should fix it now. Let's try it. Nope. That's very annoying. Okay, but I can call this rigidbody whatever I want. I'm going to call it RB. Because we always need to define public, and we need to define what the variable is, and then we need to define the name for it. So if I go here, why can't I find rigidbody? Oh, I spelled it wrong. So it's my big I. Okay. So it's looking for a rigid body 2D, right? So any rigid body I drag into it, so in the player, I can drag that in and it'll detect it and it'll find the rigid body 2D, so it knows to interact with that one. I can also do it at start, so I don't need to define it myself. I can do like RB, so I called it RB, equals get components of type rigid body 2D. So it's gonna, this is a scripting. If I go to Unity, I can look for get component Unity, and it tells me how it works, right? So I get components of what type, and the inside the triangle brackets, that's what type. So I'm looking for a get component of the type rigid body 2D. I don't care what it's called. In here, I would define a name if I was looking for a name, but in this case, I don't care. So I just leave that empty. And hopefully, if I press play, this should automatically look for its own rigid body 2D and assign to it there. So it's working. If I turn it off, it doesn't. But on start, it looks for get component, looks for anything in itself, and then looks for a rigid body and then assigns it to them. Okay, so that works. I need to fix this Visual Studio problem because it's very difficult to code. Even I have problems coding when it doesn't autocomplete. Does all of yours autocomplete works? Doesn't work. Okay, let's pause that and try and fix it. Edit preferences. Make sure the external script editor is whichever external script editor you're using. Click on that. I just turned on a bunch of these and I regenerated project files. So now when I open it, you can see before rigid body 2D was on screen, and now it is. It's defined as something in Unity. So now that's working. Cool. So before I add any if statements or movement statements or anything like that, let me just like test it, see if it's working. So on update, I'm just gonna go like RB dot, and every time I do a dot, if I have autocomplete on, it will show me all the options that I can do with that thing. So RB, remember, was my rigid body. So I did RB dot, so I can do all these things. I can do like I can check the distance, I can get components, I can like send it to sleep. But in my case, I want to add force. And usually it will show you the stuff that's most common straight away on top. So I want to add force. And the force is going to be, wait, let me see, RB dot add force. And when you hover over it, you see when I hover over add force, it tells me how I can add the force. And in this case, it is a vector 2 force. Okay? So vector 2 in the x and the y direction. Okay. And let's go to our cheat speed. So we need to do it as a new vector2. Vector2. And I need to define x and y direction. So you see, like it says there, it's showing me what it's looking for. It's looking for rigid body 2D. It's AddForce. This is my rigid body 2D. That's my AddForce. So in here, it's looking for a vector2 of the force. So this is what I'm defining now. Yes. What does it mean? What? When I make a new vector2? Okay. Sometimes if I define a vector2, this one is confusing. So it's a good question. If I define a vector2, sometimes Unity thinks I'm looking for a vector2 that already exists. And so it says, well, where is this vector2? You, for example, if I call like if I say vector2 fast is equal to new vector2 like 5 in the x direction, 5 in the y direction. Let's say. Anytime I later call fast, Unity is like, oh, that's a vector2, and I know that it means 5, 5. Okay? So I have to say new sometimes, because if I don't say new, Unity thinks I'm looking for one that I already defined, and it goes, well, you never defined this, so I don't know what this is. So if I say new, you're like, okay, brand new one, I'm listening. What is the new one? So that's kind of the difference. And then we have here, let me just do it in the x direction. I just want to test it. I'm not doing any keyboard. I just want to do a test. So this will be move force in the x direction, and then nothing in the y direction. Okay. So on update, it's going to add move force to the right, because in right is always positive, left is negative, up is positive, down is negative. So this should make it move, hopefully. Yes or no? Will it work? Exactly. I defined 0, so it's going to work, but it's not going to do anything. So let's put like 1. It's working. It fell, right? Again, very, very common new developer problem. So let's go back to the player. Let's check the rigid body. And in the rigid body, there's a thing called constraints. It's open constraints. We can freeze rotation. We can freeze position. Of course, we don't want to freeze position. We want to freeze rotation. Let's freeze rotation. Now let's test again. Perfect. We're accessing the force. We're adding the force. It's not rotating. It's doing what we want. Now we just need to make sure that it only has the force when we press the key. Okay, now it's 1:45, so let's take a little break. And we'll come back at 2 p.m. and we resume. Let me pause this. So far we just added the force, but that's actually just a test. So we know it works. Great stuff. All good. We just now need to make sure that we get our input, and we use that input to move left or right. So what I'm going to do is, there's a concept called input.getAxis in Unity. So input, let me switch here better. Input.getAxis. So what that does, and it shows here, input.getAxis will take horizontal input, so left and right, and also vertical input, and it knows it as a float. Why that's useful is, on a keyboard, we generally don't get a float. So if I press right, it's going to be like full right, and left is going to be full right. What's good about input.getAxis is I can use a controller, and if I press a little bit, it's going to like do like 0 point something. If I do full, that's going to be 1. So I can multiply based off how much input I get in, meaning I can make it move like a little bit or like much more. So it'll automatically based off that. Okay. So on update, I'm gonna check every update is every frame. Remember, so I'm gonna check every frame. What is my value right now? So float, and I'm gonna call it. What will I call it? I'll call it move equals input dot get axis, and then which axis. So you see, like it's asking for float input.getAxis, what axis I want, what axis should I have. So it's going to be a string. What's wrong with this? Horizontal. Okay, so we can check it here. There should be, so this is mouse X, mouse Y, so you can just tell it as well, mouse X, mouse Y, but let's see, where does it say? Yeah, horizontal and vertical. So it's telling me those are the types of input I can find. Okay, so this is an example of me declaring a variable during an update. I can also declare it here, but I can also declare it in any other function. So I'm declaring it during an update. So what do I want now? I'm getting my horizontal. Let me actually make it. Yeah, so I'm getting my horizontal. I can print it. I just want to see. Print move. I just want to see whether it works. So on the console, is it printing? Do I have a problem? No, it's not printing. Oh, it is. I need to define it better. Sorry. So let's just call it like print move speed is currently. Will I make a space and then I can do like a plus? So that will write that move speed is currently space and then adds the move. Okay. So that should be clear because I think it was showing the move but it wasn't doing it. Yeah, move speed is currently 0. Where did my, I can't see my, there we go. See that? It's changing. I'm pressing like a right arrow and then left arrow. Okay? So you see it's positive. So this is right, it's positive. It goes up to 1. 1 is the maximum. And then it goes left. So that's -1 is the maximum. And it slowly increases the speed as I keep holding it. And the same if I had a controller, if I press a little bit, it would be like 0 point something. And then if I keep pressing all the way, it would be like 1. And I can see that happen there. So this is a very common way to test if I'm getting the input. So cool. That is testing if the input is being... Okay, so I have a float move, left and right. I know right is positive, up to a maximum of 1. Left is negative, up to a maximum of -1. I'm detecting that number. Now what do I do with it? I actually don't need to because I'm using input.getAxis horizontal. So input.getAxis horizontal is a Unity thing. It will take left and right for the most common movements. So if I plug a controller, it knows left and right is like that. Don't need to define it. For example, on my keyboard, I can use, like, I'm using right now the arrow keys. So right arrow key, left arrow key. I didn't need to define it. It just knows that that's a horizontal input. Same if I use if you play first person games, usually uses WASD. If I use D, it's working. If I use A, it's working. So it automatically knows, like, okay, you want a horizontal input based off my input manager. In general, horizontal input is using arrow keys or WASD or the left and right controller. All of those will work. I just needed to get the axis. So now I already have this, so I don't need to define the keys. What should I do with this? So I have a force. Remember, I have a force. What should I do with the force and the move? Yeah, so remember when I wanted to go right, I did the rigid body dot add force, and then I did the new vector in the move force in the x-axis and nothing in the y-axis. So how should I do it here? No, I still want X, but now I just need to move left and right. No? Let's have a look here. So we want to first, no, that's for animator. Where is the movement? Here. So there's this. This is a very complicated version, but basically what I need to do is I need to add force, and I want to control the speed in the X direction. So let me show that. I'm just going to do it without the if statement. That has an if statement to check. This is checking like the maximum speed, but right now let's just do it. So we'll do RB, which is the rigid body, dot what? Add force. We know that it needs a vector 2. And I know that I want to affect it in the x-axis, right? So what should I put in the x-axis? If I have a move force, if I have a float from move force, what should go in the x-axis? Move force? Just move force? But we define the value in here, right? We define the value here. So if I just add, okay, this was what I had before, right? Move force and oh, sorry, new vector 2. Sorry. New vector 2. So that's what I had before. It's doing the move force and 0, but that will move it, but it only goes right. It doesn't take into account my input. So it's working, but I'm pressing left and right, and it doesn't do anything. So how do I make it take into account my input? So that's okay. It's our first time. So let's have a look at the problem. I wanted to do left and right. I wanted to move with the force of move force, but it needs to know the direction. I am also getting another number here, the float or the move, that is being taken from my direction, my left and right direction. So what I can do is, and remember that its maximum is 1, right? The maximum, so this is, let me comment this. This gives me direction being pressed, e.g. left or right button, to a maximum of 1, full right, or minus 1, full left. Okay, so minus 1 is full left, minus 1. So what we can do is just, very simple, move force, multiply by that move here. So if I have the move force multiplied by 1, it's going to go right. Multiply by negative 1, it's going to go left. Multiply by 0, if I have no input, doesn't do anything. Does that make sense? Yeah? Let's test. There may be some problems, but it's okay. Let's just test. Actually, I can't even see my, sorry, let me just, I'm going to add something dumb to the player just so I can see where it's going. Sphere with no collider. Just so I can see what it's doing. So press play. No input, not doing anything. Cool, not moving. I'm going to add right input. It's going to go up to the force. And then I'm going to add left input. It's going to go up to the force. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah? Alright. There's a few problems. Well, let's deal with the biggest problem. So the biggest problem is, move it all the way here. If I keep pressing, it's going to keep accelerating and accelerating and accelerating because it's adding force. So if you remember from physics, as long as I keep adding force, it's going to continue getting faster and faster and faster and faster. So what do I need to do? So let me make it more obvious. So let me make it like move force 5. So that's going to be like pretty fast. move it here. Sorry, I'm moving the camera. Sorry. 5. It's suddenly getting so fast, right? So how do I do that? What do I need to do? Okay, so the force is like always adding 5, no matter what. But I need to define a maximum speed, a maximum velocity. Okay, so let's do that. So I need to do probably a float because I want to make sure it's accurate. Max velocity. Maximum speed the player is allowed to move. And I can define that here. So let's say the maximum velocity is 10. So I want it keeps adding force, so it keeps accelerating until it hits 10. Once it hits 10, I want it to stop accelerating. So how do I control that right now? Now I added the max velocity, but I haven't used it. How do I use it? Here's where the movement happens. So I need to have a condition, right? I need to have the condition, and what the condition is. What is the condition here? Yes. So let's do if statement. It's an if statement. So if the rigid body's velocity, so RB dot, what is velocity? Oops, sorry. RB dot velocity, and there's going to be a problem with this, is greater than or equal to what is it? Max velocity, or less than or equal to less than max velocity, less than max velocity. What's wrong here? RB dot velocity is max velocity is a float. RB dot velocity. Okay, that's why I need a magnitude. Yes. So I need the velocity because velocity is given to me in an x direction and a y direction. So I need to I want to know the full velocity. So I can do velocity dot x, let's say. So I only care about the x direction. So RB dot velocity dot x, as long as it's less than max velocity, we can do the force. So let's try that. I made a problem. I made a mistake on purpose. If you detect it, let me know. Let's find out. So it's less than, right? So see, it's not. Let me just make it more obvious. Put it here. Let me make the acceleration super fast. So let's make it 20. Super fast acceleration, but maximum velocity is 10. Let's see what that looks like. So it'll accelerate really quickly, but it won't exceed 10. No problem. However, when I go left, it's super fast. Why? We only define one direction because RB.velocity.x is if it's positive, it'll be positive. So when it goes up to 10, the max velocity will be 10, no problem. But if I'm going left, remember that it's negative. So the velocity is counted as negative. So it's never going to be more than max velocity when it's going left. So what do we do? How do I fix this? There's two ways. Yes. Okay. So there's two ways. One is I take the velocity of x, and then I doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, I convert it to just a number. That way is like this. It's mathf dot abs rb the velocity dot x. So mathf.abs is it just means the absolute number. So it doesn't care if it's positive or negative, just gives it as a number. That's one method. So if I search, for example, unity get magnitude of number, it should show me mathf.abs. Okay? And mathf.abs, this is a great example. If I write minus 10.5, it's going to be 10.5. It's going to convert it to positive. Doesn't matter. Okay? That's option one. And that's a good option. Works very well. It's actually the simple option. The option number two, I can just define this as OR. So we haven't looked at OR yet. If statements can have ands and ORs, right? So we're going to do OR rb.velocity.x is, sorry, and, we're doing and. We need to, no, we do OR. And minus max velocity. Does that work? Yeah, as long as it's more than max velocity. I believe that should work. Let's see. Oh no, it's not working. So it should be an, I guess. Perfect. So in both directions it's working. But the other option, the method ABS, it's a bit neater, and it has less characters in it, and therefore easier to read. So probably I would choose that option. Both work, as you can see. That works fine. The other way also works fine. So I'm going to use the other option. Alright, so that works fine. It's moving left and right. No problem. Just make sure it's working fine. Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, let's see. When I stop moving, I stop moving, right? Pressing, and I stop moving. It's still moving because it has physics. So in a real thing, if I push it, it's going to keep sliding a little bit. So how do I deal with this? Now, this is a very difficult question because this really depends on the game you're building. If I want it so I move, as soon as I let go, immediately stop. Then I'll just make it like if the input is 0, to stop. Just no velocity. Sometimes I want it to stop. So if you play Mario, for example, when you're jumping in a platform, even if you let go, there's a little bit, like it slows down a little bit. That we can control using something called a physics collider. So that will be on, where are we here? Material. Physics material. So right now it's using a default, none, no physics material. This is a asset that I can create. So I'm going to create, where is physics material? I'm blind. Oh, here. Yes. I'll call it like platformer material. And I can just drag it into here. Oh, here, sorry. Why? Why? That's weird. Ah! Thank you. I was like, what am I doing? No, still can't. That's very weird. But here I can do like friction. So let me make the friction. And then static friction as well. So when it's moving, how much is the friction? Dynamic is like when it's moving. And then when it's static, how much is the friction that it needs to overcome. Now, and then I have like bounciness as well. So for example, if I wanted like hit a wall and bounce a little bit, I can add like 0. Now the question is, why can't I add it to my physics material? Oh, I did this stupid. I made a physics material 3D. I need a physics material 2D. So I did it dumb. That one wasn't on purpose. 2D, physics material 2D. Okay. Platformer material. It was a test. It was a test. Well done. Okay, so platformer, and there we go. Friction. Let's leave bounce. It's a bit of bounciness. Not that it's gonna show anything. Physics material. Now let's see how that works. I let go. It's a little slower. Maybe let's add up the friction a little bit. No, needs more, much more. I don't think it's actually working very well. Let's do a bit of drag here as well. Okay, the drag is working a bit better for me. Yeah, cool. Okay. There's also this should be okay actually. Yeah, it's fine. You know, like when you're in play mode, sometimes when you change stuff, it doesn't save. Yeah. So that didn't save. So okay, so the drag works a bit better for me than the physics material actually. But either way, both works. Cool. Stop moving. Stop moving. So it has a little bit of momentum, but not that much. Cool. All right. So just for the end, we need to do. Like, do you have a lab after this, right? Okay. Okay. You don't have me to.